economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. Confuse you.
My definition of white supremacy and racism, I use those two terms as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
ASI is in Washington, D.C. today to celebrate 400 years of slavery in America. America started breeding slaves in August 1619. January 16, 1865, General Sherman was supposed to enact an order where slaves got 40 acres and a mule. He dropped the ball. It didn't happen. ASI is a nonprofit organization established in 2001 to represent the American slave culture. Our mission is threefold: properly identify American slaves as the American slave culture, guide descendants of American slaves to the economic battlefield that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told us to go to when we were misidentified as Negroes. And then we will assimilate descendants of American slaves into mainstream America properly. ASI is the foundation that supports the American slave culture. It belongs to descendants of American slaves. The intelligence we receive here today will promote growth in the American slave culture. ASI's plan is profitable and it is idiot-proof. We can't lose if we follow the plan, because intelligence has no boundaries. Descendants of American slaves are not African Americans. There is no reason for our people to continue down this road of racial destruction, broke and begging, when ASI is showing us a better way to go. If the U.S. government won't help us, there are enough rich slaves in America to free our own people. I designed this here plan right here to medicate the suffering and the hurt that was done to the American slave culture. This plan here is an economic plan that will usher descendants of American slaves into mainstream America. We have since stagnated in racial ignorance, misidentified, misnamed, and regulated to economic starvation. Black leaders are discussing reparations for slavery emotionally. This creates more mystery and mystique to slavery than is necessary. We must connect with the divine power that is reflected through us from slavery. African Americans, by definition, description, and explanation, are immigrants. America didn't breed African Americans. America bred slaves. The slaves belong to America. We are therefore American slaves. And after 400 years of slavery, we are ready to make our move to the economic battlefield. If black leaders don't wise up and understand who we are and understand that we are American slaves, we will be stuck right where we are forever, in inner city poverty, receiving welfare checks, and waiting for white folks' handouts. My work for the past 50 years is my gift to America. Descendants of American Slavery future is looming right before us. It is up to today's leaders what the future holds for the American slave culture. If you get a chance, visit www.slaves-usa.com.
When you think of political parties, you think of Democrat or Republican. Truth is, just about any group can stake a claim at becoming a political party, no matter how big or small. WLKY's Dwayne Pullman shows us how a small group in Louisville focused on slavery is now a legitimate party with candidates on this year's ballot.
You are witnessing
there is a successful route.
Amen.
The birth of a religious and political movement.
We are descendants of American slaves.
The Descendants of American Slaves is officially Kentucky's newest political party.
How are you?
Headquartered here at this humble church on the west side of Louisville.
I'm not afraid of the political arena because you told me that you would be with me every step of the way.
The Descendants of American Slaves gathers each Sunday to pray and politic.
You said if I ever needed you to call you. Well, Father, I need you. I need you, Father, because I can't hardly do this by myself.
Retired businessman Norris Shelton hatched the idea, first as a movement.
This is the start of something that should have been done years and years ago.
And now as a political party.
Because of the cover-up of slavery, there is an entire group of people in America who are not being properly represented in our political arena.
Shelton is running for state senate. Henry Owens is running for state rep. Mark Wooten is going for the conservation district. All are on the ballot as members of the Descendants of American Slaves political party. The party's platform is simple. First, to recognize not African Americans, but descendants of slaves.
Legally and on paper, they are not being represented.
And to pay reparations for that slavery.
Most people look at that as a negative. They say, oh, here they come again and want some more welfare. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Only by addressing the original sin of slavery, Shelton says, can Louisville, Kentucky, and the country reverse discrimination, violence, and despair now gripping our cities.
That's why we see all these killings and murders in the West End and so much crime and violence. And
I believe that change is necessary sometimes.
Amen.
While some may dismiss these sights and sounds, Shelton is sure that his grassroots group will grow into a larger movement that will sweep the country.
I see this as being as large as the American Civil War.
One believer at a time.
Jesus lifted me.
I'm Dwayne Pullman, WLKY News.
Shelton is running against State Senator Gerald Neal. Neal is the first African-American man elected to Kentucky's Senate and has served in the state legislature longer than any other African-American. Later in the month, we'll focus on both candidates.
The white supremacists control the entire world and all the non-white people who are on it, on the planet. And so that would include, and I won't get into the individual names because it doesn't matter. If you're classified as non-white, you are subject to the system of white supremacy, period, regardless of who you are, where you are. And that's what you are, a subject to the system of white supremacy. That's what supreme means. We have to look at that word supreme seriously. I'm a spokesperson. According to compensatory counter-racist logic, any black person who speaks is a black spokesperson. Doesn't make any difference. The white supremacists are supreme over all non-white people. And the non-white people who speak, I'm speaking, you're speaking, is a black spokesperson. You're speaking. They allow us to speak. The white supremacists allow us to speak. When they don't want us to speak, they kill us. All non-white people accept whatever the white supremacists put out for them. Here again, when you start talking about white supremacy, you don't talk about countries. There's no such thing as a country in the system of white supremacy. America doesn't exist. We're all getting something out of it because we are born in prison. The prison is called the planet Earth. And the white supremacists dictate to the non-white people on the entire planet Earth. We're all born in prison. All non-white people are born in the prison of white supremacy. And we are all prisoners. We are all subject to the warden of that prison. And the warden of that prison is every white person who practices white supremacy. That's the equation. If we don't look at it like that, now we're into confusion. Because that's the way it is. Yes, you have to eliminate the actual prison by eliminating the prison system. See, you can have a prison or building that's called a prison, but the building is no longer a prison if you make the building a hospital or a factory. And that's what we're supposed to be in the process of doing through our everyday actions as individuals. That's why I wrote my book. Through our everyday actions as individuals, we can turn that prison, which is the entire planet, into a place of justice, into the type of place that it ought to have been in the first place. Now we are into confusion.
You ready to go to work?
Oh my God, I'm so ready to go to work.
The moment you find out from the boss, you've got the job.
First of all, is the answer yes?
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe.
Joe Biden's call to Kamala Harris, ending months of speculation and creating history. The first African-American woman to run for vice president.
Now we are into confusion.
The first African-American woman to run for vice president. The first African-American woman to run for vice president.
A crusading journalist and political activist, Charlotta Bass was at the forefront of the civil rights struggles of her time. Charlotta Bass was an extraordinary woman. Why? She recognized her talent and had the courage to act upon convictions. She also did the unexpected. In an era when racism was rampant and women and people of color were largely excluded from public discourse, she headed an African-American newspaper in Los Angeles that sought civil rights for the disadvantaged. As editor of the California Eagle from 1912 to 1951, Charlotta Bass was a tireless advocate for social change. Born in 1874 in South Carolina, she moved to Los Angeles in 1910 and found a job selling subscriptions at the Eagle newspaper for $5 a week. At the time, the Eagle was California's oldest African-American newspaper. In 1912, the manager of the paper asked Charlotta to take over as editor. A year later, she bought the newspaper for $50 and changed the name to the California Eagle. Her newspaper career spanned 40 years, through World War I and II, the Great Depression, and the early Civil Rights Movement. Throughout these changing times, the California Eagle was Charlotta Bass's voice to challenge inequality for African Americans, workers, women, and other minorities. But she was not content with merely describing unjust conditions. She used her weekly column On the Sidewalk and other editorials to promote direct action campaigns. Through her 1931 Don't Shop Where You Can't Work campaign, she promoted boycotts of places known for discriminatory hiring practices. Charlotta attacked racism on all fronts by calling attention to police brutality against minorities and condemning the derogatory portrayal of African Americans by Hollywood. She also pushed for reform and ran as a political candidate at the local and national level. In 1952, Charlotta Bass made history by becoming the first African-American woman to run for Vice President of the United States, running with the slogan, "Win or lose, we win by raising the issues." Charlotta Bass exposed prejudice in all areas of life and wasn't afraid of the repercussions. Her uncompromising stance against racial injustice resulted in her life being threatened on many occasions. She was also branded a communist, and the FBI placed her under surveillance on the charge that her paper was subversive. But she never wavered in her pursuit of justice. Charlotta Bass and her newspaper served the people, speaking for them and fighting for them against inequality. The combined force of her writing and political activism helped to lay the groundwork for the civil and political liberties we enjoy today.
Now we are into confusion.
Hi guys, it's Mindy. I'm here in my kitchen, and today we are cooking, but we have a very special guest. Very special. Senator Kamala Harris.
Hi guys.
Wait, so here's what I want to know.
Okay.
Is it respectful to call, like, I should be calling you Senator Harris, right?
No, you should not. That's not on my birth certificate.
Okay.
Kamala? Yes, please.
Okay, because the Indian in me, I feel like my parents,
Just
my
don't
dad
call
will
me
watch
a-
this.
Just don't call me auntie.
Okay, I won't call you auntie. They'll be like, how could you call her by her first name? She's worked so hard. Okay, so what we're gonna cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you are Indian.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that, but I find that wherever I go and I see Indian people at the supermarket, on the street, everyone's like, you know Kamala Harris is Indian, right? It's like the thing we're so excited about to have you running for president.
Yeah.
So we're both Indian,
Yes.
but actually we're both South Indian.
Yes. You look like the entire one half of my family.
Now we are into confusion.
When it comes to college admissions, how much of a role should race play? That question back in the news this week. For the first time in Harvard University's history, the majority of students accepted into the incoming freshman class identify as non-white, 50.8% to be precise. But at the same time came news that the Department of Justice is investigating allegations the school is denying places to qualified Asian American students. VJ Jojo Chokolingam, now the head of admissions consultant at Interview SOS, has a unique experience with this topic. An Indian American, he realized the only way that he would be accepted at med school would be to pass as black. He chronicled his experiences in his book, Almost Black, the true story of how I got into medical school by pretending to be black. VJ Chokolingam joins me now. So you were studying statistics at the University of Chicago, and you say to yourself, I don't stand a chance with my 3.1. What did you do?
Well, I shaved my head, I trimmed my eyelashes, and I decided to join the organization of black students so I could apply to medical school as a black man. I also used my middle name, Jojo. I subsequently interviewed at medical schools across the country and managed to get waitlisted at Washington University and the University of Pennsylvania, then ranked the second, the third, and fourth best medical schools in the country, and got into St. Louis University School of Medicine, despite the fact that my pretty pitiful 3.1 GPA was dramatically lower than their average of 3.7. Now, I wanted to mention a statistic you mentioned earlier in the program, which is that the majority of Harvard is now a minority. And I don't think that's true. I think that's very deceptive, because I think you're forgetting about the Pocahontas factor. And that is that there's a large number of people who are whiter than winter in Alaska who pose as minorities based on flimsy reasons. And as a result, it skews the statistics because they know that it can improve their chances of admission. So self-reporting of statistics that are minority, I don't think that's necessarily the best data to use.
So, VJ, what you're saying is that you didn't just check a box, you went full on Tootsie, and there are others out there who may not adopt the personification of a particular group. But they're checking the same box in the same way.
I'm an independent admissions consultant. And I have so many clients who, they have an African-American great-great-grandfather, their great-great-grandmother was Hispanic or something like that. And for very flimsy reasons, they call themselves minority because they know it's going to improve their chances of admissions. So we cannot ignore the Pocahontas factor when you look at that statistic that 51% of people at Harvard are saying that they're
all right, well, listen, because you are using the nickname, let's go there. You've said that what Lincoln did vis-a-vis slavery, Trump will do vis-a-vis affirmative action. Explain.
I believe that President Trump, by appointing conservative anti-affirmative action justices and by using the Justice Department to go after the colleges and universities, I believe that he will end affirmative action like Lincoln ended slavery. As you know, Bob Jones University many years ago lost its nonprofit status because of its racist policies. Similarly, when it comes to the issue of affirmative action, the colleges and universities have pleaded guilty as charged. They publicly endorsed racial discrimination in the form of affirmative action in the Fisher case. Therefore, the Trump Justice Department could use, with the change in the Supreme Court, could effectively force the universities to end their racist affirmative action policies by forcing them to lose their federal funding. So, as I said, President Trump will end affirmative action like Lincoln ended slavery.
And I want to put on the screen a pie chart that shows the breakdown of this incoming class at Harvard. And I want to ask you a question. 22.2% Asian American. How many Asians are too many Asians for the Harvard incoming class? Should there be any limit whatsoever? What if on the merits, if you go by GPA and SAT score, you could fill the entire class at Harvard with Asian Americans? Should they do so?
First of all, there is a multifactorial admissions process. There are 9 criteria, including grades, test scores, letters of recommendation, essays. So I'm not saying that grades and test scores should be the only consideration. The second thing is data can easily be manipulated. I'm a CFA charter holder, but I can assess that. But the simple point is that as an Asian American, it is harder to get into college or graduate school than any other racial category. In every place where the data is available, it is consistently harder for an Asian American to get in. I used the example earlier of medical school admissions, where it was 50% easier to get into medical school as an Asian American compared to an African American. So statistical data, there is no rationalization for racism. Affirmative action is a system of legalized racism. It is a racial classification system that changes people's chances of admission to college or graduate school, and there is no justification for it.
But Vijay, you understand the point that I'm trying to make, which is to say that from the perspective of the admissions office, they are seeking to assemble a diverse student body. And if Asians on the merits could dominate the class, they might not want to do that because that therefore detracts from the ability of having equal representation of all groups. You get the final word as long as you make it quick.
I'm glad that you brought up that point. I had the opportunity to go to UCLA, which is a school that doesn't practice affirmative action in admissions. We had a diverse class of African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, and whites with a rich educational experience without practicing racial discrimination in the form of affirmative action. So I don't want anyone to believe that affirmative action racism is essential to a good education.
Understood. Vijay Jojo Chokal Ingham. By the way, Mindy Kaling's brother. I saved that for the end. Thank you for being here.
Now we are into confusion.
Well, first of all, I'm actually grateful to Mindy because she was the first person all of those years ago to suggest that I should write about my experiences posing as black. She thought it was pretty funny and actually pretty cool that I got in by posing as black. Still, years later, when I approached her with the copy of the book proposal and asked for her support, I was surprised when she told me this book will bring shame on the family and told me she strongly opposed it. I was even more surprised when she called Us Weekly and told them that she was not aware of the plot when it went down, because the truth is, not only was she aware, but she actually advised me. She advised me to withdraw my application from Harvard and Dartmouth, where my family had connections. Maybe I should not have been so surprised by Mindy's opposition to the book, because after all, she benefited from NBC's diversity program. You might say that Mindy made millions because of affirmative action. Although personally, I don't think that anyone should benefit from racism.
Now we are into confusion.
Today's Black History Month FYI honors civil rights activist Charlotta Bass, the first black woman to own and publish a newspaper. Born in Sumter, South Carolina in 1874, she fled the Jim Crow South and learned about journalism selling black-owned newspapers, eventually taking control of the California Eagle. From 1912 to 1951, Mrs. Bass used the paper to combat racial injustice, from the Ku Klux Klan to police brutality to discriminatory hiring practices. After retiring from the newspaper business, she became the first black woman to run for vice president as a Progressive Party candidate. Oh. That's your Black History Month FYI.
You know, you learn more about Black history on this show than anybody learns in school.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, this is why when I was in college, there was a whole movement to have just a whole department for Black history.
Yes.
Because you need it. No one knows in the lower schools what happened. We never learned about it.
Now we are into confusion.
Now, we were in Cleveland for the Republican National Convention. It seemed like Donald Trump and company were trying to make an overture to the South Asian community. They had a Sikh Ardas to start off day two. They had Muslims for Trump. What, if anything, is the Democratic Party trying to do to get South Asians involved in this party?
Yeah, well, the Democratic Party for a very long time, not just this election cycle, has been doing a lot of active outreach around the South Asians, around the API in general, and will continue to do it. I mean, what we know in particular when you're talking about the South Asian community, we're talking about the Indian community more specifically, it is a growing community in the United States in terms of its voting bloc, in terms of its participation, and I think the party knows that and knows that this is part of our collective community, and there needs to be outreach and inclusion.
And certainly you could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Knock wood.
Kamala Harris, Attorney General of California, U.S. Senate candidate, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Now we are into confusion.
Presidential candidate Kamala Harris decided to hit up the Breakfast Club and really open up to Charlamagne and the crew. Kamala specifically addressed her critics who have been questioning her blackness due to the fact that her parents were immigrants born in India and Jamaica. She spent her high school years in Canada and because she's married to a white man. Here's what Kamala had to say.
They're trying to do what has been happening over the last 2 years, which is powerful voices trying to sow hate and division among us. Mm-hmm. And so we need to recognize when we're being played. But I'm black, yes. And I'm proud of being black. Absolutely. And I was born black, I will die black. And I'm proud of being black. And I'm not gonna make any excuses for anybody.
Now we are into confusion.
Do you support reparations for black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow for almost a century. We had legalized discrimination, segregation, and now we have segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress. We have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit black children, black families, black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right?
Now we are into confusion.
So, lady, like Kamala, have you ever had to deal with someone trying to question the authenticity of your race?
Confusion.
With all this melanin, no, it has never happened to me. It's abundantly clear that I am a black woman. And I think they only do that with black people. Like this one thing, first of all, we're not cute enough, perfect enough, all of that. And then when we try to advance, we have to prove that we're black, which are all the things that they say we shouldn't be.
Right.
So I'm just confused by it. I don't understand it. And may I say this about my soror, Kamala Harris? She went to Howard University and pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha. You don't get no blacker than that. She's black. She's black. She's black.
Well, if you're talking about, there's a difference between black people. Black people, because I looked up the term, is used socially for racial classification in certain countries. So she would be black. If you're talking about blackness, that is a word that's used to describe a persona or emotional bonding experience with the black culture. I do think, in all due respect, that people are questioning her blackness because of some of the things that she has done in her past when she was a prosecutor. And I think that's what people are talking about when it comes to prison reform. And with her being married to a white man. I have to say this, me being a person dating a white man, that is about compatibility. That is not about blackness.
Now we are into confusion.
California's Kamala Harris is the first Indian American U.S. Senator.
Confusion.
Remember, Kamala Harris, California's Attorney General, has also made history, becoming the first Indian American woman to be elected to the U.S. Senate.
Confusion.
Senator Harris, you have also been quite critical of Vice President Biden's policies on race, specifically on the issue of busing in the 1970s, having benefited from busing when you were a young child. Vice President Biden says that your current position on busing, you're opposed to federally mandated busing, that position is the same as his position. Is he right?
That is simply false. And let's be very clear about this. When Vice President Biden was in the United States Senate working with segregationists to oppose busing, which was the vehicle by which we would integrate America's public schools, had I been in the United States Senate at that time, I would have been completely on the other side of the aisle. And let's be clear about this. Had those segregationists their way, I would not be a member of the United States Senate, Cory Booker would not be a member of the United States Senate, and Barack Obama would not have been in a position to nominate him to the title he now holds. And so, on that issue, we could not be more apart, which is that the Vice President has still failed to acknowledge that it was wrong to take the position that he took at that time. Now, I would like to also talk about this conversation about Eric Garner, because I, too, met with his mother. And one of the things that we've got to be clear about is that this President of the United States, Donald Trump, while he has been in office, has quietly been allowing the United States Department of Justice to shut down consent decrees, to stop pattern and practice investigations. On that case, we also know that the Civil Rights Division, this is important, the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice said charges should have been filed, but this United States Department of Justice usurped, and I believe it is because that president did not want those charges to go forward, and they overrode a decision by the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. Under my administration, the Civil Rights Division will reign, and there will be independent investigations.
Vice President Biden, I want to give you a chance to respond to what Senator Harris just said.
When Senator Harris was the Attorney General for 8 years in the state of California, there were two of the most segregated school districts in the country, in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. And she did not, like, I didn't see a single solitary time she brought a case against them to desegregate them. Secondly, she also was in a situation where she had a police department when she was there that in fact was abusing people's rights. And the fact was that she, in fact, was told by her own people, that her own staff, that she should do something about and disclose to defense attorneys like me that you, in fact, have been, the police officer did something that did not give you information that would exculpate your client. She didn't do that. She never did it. And so what happened? Along came a federal judge and said, enough, enough, and he freed 1,000 of these people. If you doubt me, Google 1,000 prisoners freed, Kamala Harris.
Thank you, Vice President Biden. Senator Harris, your response?
That is simply not true. And as Attorney General of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice, I am proud of the work we did, work that has received national recognition for what has been the important work of reforming a criminal justice system and cleaning up the consequences of the bills that you passed when you were in the United States Senate for decades. It was the work of creating one of the first in the nation initiatives around re-entering former offenders and getting them jobs and counseling.
Thank you, Senator.
I did the work as Attorney General of putting body cameras on special agents in the state of California, and I'm proud of that work.
I want to bring in Congresswoman Gabbard. Congresswoman Gabbard, you took issue with Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate. You called it a, quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response?
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform. That is why we created initiatives that were about re-entering former offenders and getting them counseling. It is why, and because I know that criminal justice system is so broken, that I am an advocate for what we need to do to not only decriminalize, but legalize marijuana in the United States.
I want to bring Congresswoman Gabbard back in. Your response?
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you are in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not, and worse yet, in the case of those who were on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that, and the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Senator Harris.
My entire career, I have been personally opposed to the death penalty, and that has never changed. And I dare anybody who is in a position to make that decision, to face the people I have faced, to say, I will not seek the death penalty. That is my background. That is my work. I am proud of it. I think you can judge people by when they are under fire, and it's not about some fancy opinion on a stage, but when they're in the position to actually make a decision, what do they do? When I was in the position of having to decide whether or not to seek a death penalty on cases I prosecuted, I made a very difficult decision that was not popular to not seek the death penalty.
Now we are into confusion.
And I am proud of that work.
Kamala Harris, have y'all seen the birth certificate of Kamala Harris? They're trying to say, oh, this is the birtherism bullshit. See, when they nominated Kamala Harris to be vice president with Biden to run on the same bill, all the Democratic Negro bootlicks start running out here, y'all better support a black woman. Y'all stop all that complaining. Y'all just be happy about a black woman. Kamala Harris has never identified as a black woman, y'all. Her identifying as a black woman is some recent shit, dude. Let's keep it a buck. If you look at old interviews of her, she's always said she's Indian or Asian. She just recently started that black woman shit, dude.
And I am proud of that work.
Let's be real.
Confusion.
Let's be real. We had a birth certificate. Her mother is East Indian and identifies, she put her race as Caucasian. Her dad, this is the key right here, because this is the little Jedi mind trick they're trying to play. Her dad, on race, he put Jamaican.
Confusion.
And what niggas are doing, especially the Democrats and the whole Rolly crowd, well, Jamaican, that black, Jamaicans, that's black.
Confusion.
Her dad put Jamaican for a reason. Jamaican is not a race. I want y'all to understand. Jamaican is not a race. Jamaican is not a race. And understand Jamaican culture. See, us over here, when you let them tell it, everybody in Jamaica just looks at themselves as one big black happy family. That ain't the fucking case at all. I want y'all to understand that. That's very important for you to understand. They don't tell you that. We don't understand that concept because we don't live there. Over here, black is black. Over there, it ain't like that, dude. They have all types of racial color cast in the Caribbean, especially in Jamaica.
Confusion.
In Jamaica, you got a motherfucker who look my color and don't identify as black.
Confusion.
You got people, the mixed, the browns, they got all types of little racial cast over there, man, that they learned and got down with the British, starting really in the early to mid 1850s. That's when they really started that color cast system out there in Jamaica. So yeah, you got East Indian Jamaicans, you got Chinese Jamaicans. You dig? They got those color cast systems heavy out there. That mulatto class who don't view themselves as black folks.
Confusion.
They view themselves as something other than. Kamala Harris has never grown up and identified really as a black person. Her family hasn't. So when they say we better respect her as a black person, who the fuck is black?
Confusion.
Yeah, them coolies over there, man, please.
Confusion.
Her dad damn sure ain't never identified as black. And again, they prided themselves on coming from descendants of slave owners over there.
And I am proud of that work.
Yeah?
Now we're into confusion.
So what do they do? They got so many different categories over there, man. It's insane.
Confusion.
They got a gang of different categories over there, dude. You might have a black mom and an East Indian dad. You might have a Chinese dad and a black mom. And the kids are going to identify as something else. It's heavy over there, man. We don't get that part of the game. It's real deep over there. But one thing we do know for sure, Kamala Harris is not and has never identified with being a foundational black American. She's from a different ethnic group. So she's not our representative. Yeah, the Jamaicans do. They identify over here. Let's be clear. Over here, they identify with nationality. Over here. Let's be very clear. Over here, they identify with nationality. Over there, they got these little racial categories because everybody's Jamaican over there. But what type of Jamaican are you? Well, I'm mixed. I'm a brown Jamaican. I'm mulatto. I'm octoroon. I'm coolie. Whatever.
Confusion. Confusion.
Yeah, so over here, before they say black, oh no, I'm Jamaican. Oh, I'm not black. What's my race? Oh, Jamaican.
Confusion.
That's how they can differentiate themselves from us. Nigga, fuck us, Kamala Harris. We ain't rocking with her like that. We ain't rocking with her like that. And not just because of her racial difference, because the thing is, that's the only thing they're trying to hang their hat on as far as us supporting her. Because we know her policies ain't for us. She's already told us that she ain't gonna do shit for us. So the only thing they can hang their hat on is by trying to shame us. Hey, why don't y'all support a black woman, man? Y'all just hating on the black woman. Why don't y'all support a black woman? No. You find a black woman and I'll support her. But her, no, I smell curry. No. You find me a black woman and I'll support her, but that ain't it. That's not it right there. Genetically, yeah, but as far as culture, because see, we got to understand genetics and culture. Genetically, yeah, we all share the same genetics, but the name of the game is all about what you got up in here, the culture, because you can be genetically the same as somebody, but if this nigga is something else up here, you fucked.
Confusion.
If this nigga think he's something else here, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking this is my brother, oh, he looks like me, that's my brother right there, we gonna be good. But this nigga's a butter biscuit eating coon.
Confusion.
Who in his mind, he's just a dark-skinned Briton.
Confusion.
I'm done fucking with this nigga. I'm through. This nigga can get over on my ass.
Confusion.
So we got to be very careful about people we have as our representatives. And we have to have them openly say, okay, look, if you so goddamn black, what are you going to do for black people if I put you in a position of power over me? Well, I'm not going to do nothing just for black people. No.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
Okay, we'll go over there and get you some curry goat and sit your ass down. Because when Kamala Harris, that's all I remember of Kamala Harris. That's all you need to remember of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris talking about what the fuck she ain't gonna be doing for black people. That's all you need to know about her. Yeah, nigga, there's Somalians who be like, I ain't black, and be 10 shades darker than midnight. It's what's in here. It's what's in here.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No. And I am proud of that work.
Now we are into confusion.
She's a woman of color, but she is a black woman.
Okay, that's fine. I agree with that. I agree with that. But is she African American? No. But is she African American? There's a difference. There's nothing wrong with that. No one is trying to take anything away from her.
Let's go down into her lineage.
I think you're falling into a trap of that. All she had to do was say, "I am black, but I'm not African American." That's it.
John, I'm not falling in a trap. I'm not falling in. Let me finish. Hold on. I'm not falling into a trap by that. When she goes down her lineage, many Africans landed in Jamaica and all these other Caribbean islands. So she could indeed be African American mixed with others. But she is
Jamaica's not America.
But she is a black woman. She was born
did not
here.
Come out of Jim Crow.
Okay, well let's go into Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was born in Canada.
I'm not talking about Ted Cruz. This is not about Ted Cruz. You're changing the subject.
But you know what? We cannot. It was hypocrisy. I'm not changing the subject.
Yes, you are.
She's a black woman. I don't know what you want.
Cruz.
Okay.
Now we are into confusion.
I am proud of that work.
Today it's time to stop singing and start swinging.
We are coming to get our check.
You are now listening to P.A.R. That's People Activity Radio. And I'm your host, JohnGHorse. Welcome. You have found your family in a peaceful place. P.A.R. is a family-friendly information distribution program seeking to inform non-white people, in particular, black classifieds, and assisting in counter-racist codification. The title of today's episode is United States Descendants of Enslavement Defined, Benign Neglect, Racial Classification Confusion, and the Illusion of Inclusion. I'm going to repeat that one more again. The title of today's episode is United States Descendants of Enslavement Defined, Benign Neglect, Racial Classification Confusion, and the Illusion of Inclusion. Let's get it in. Where do we begin? This is P.A.R. People Activity Radio, and I am your host, JohnGHorse. Welcome. You have indeed found your family in a peaceful place, and I will repeat the title of today's episode for context. And the title is U.S. Descendants of Enslavement Defined, Benign Neglect, Racial Classification Confusion, and the Illusion of Inclusion. Where do we begin? Where do we begin? I decided to delve into United States Descendants of Enslavement Defined for one reason and one reason only. And if you have not been living under a rock and you've paid a small bit of attention to anything mainstream radio or mainstream news, mainstream media have been presenting for the last week in the news cycle, it is this misinformation stating that Kamala Harris is the first black woman to be on a vice president ticket of a presidential campaign. Now, if I worded that wrong, y'all know what I mean. So let's move on. And that is not true. Am I here to debate whether Kamala Harris is classified as black? No. I'm going to give that on up. Let's just move forward saying that JohnGHorse does not debate whether Kamala Harris is classified as black. Let's just move forward saying, yeah, she classified as black. Am I here to debate whether Kamala Harris is Indian or has Indian ancestors? No, I'm not. Her mama's from India. All I'm here to do is to define what a descendant of American slaves is. I'm here to define what an American descendant of slaves is. I'm here to give clarification on who and what a foundational black American is. Now, I say all three of these terms because they were founded by three different entities. Number one, Norris Shelton, retired businessman, I believe out of Alabama or Mississippi. I could be in error. You can find his information on slaves-usa.com. One more time, Norris Shelton, who created a codification identifying descendants of American slaves, has literature and information on what that is. And you can find that on slaves-usa.com. Also, similar codification. Most notable codification, which is very similar to Norris Shelton's DOAS, is Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell's hashtag ADOS, which stands for American Descendants of Slaves. And if you're confused of who that is and what that is, you can find that information on ADOS101.com. One more time, Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore's codification on this particular self-identification, exclusive identification for people who find themselves classified as black in the United States of America and descend from slaves. You can find their information on ADOS101.com. ADOS. And the third term that is used in conscious social lexicons is the foundational Black American hashtag, FBA, founded, created by filmmaker, lecturer, author extraordinaire Tariq Nasheed. And he has an exclusive news platform, media platform that uses that term, foundational Black American news. FBA News. You can find that on FBAnews.com. Now, I'm not finna be sitting here giving long lectures on what these things are. I gave you 3 reference materials that you can go to search out what Descendants of American Slaves is by way of Norris Shelton on slaves-usa.com. You can go to ADOS101.com, founded by Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, and you can delve into FBAnews.com, created by Tariq Nasheed. All these groups are saying the same thing. One big fat codification. People who descend from American slaves, in particular people who descend from United States slavery, are an exclusive group that need to be compensated for specific history, lineage, and heritage experienced by no one else but us from the federal government of the United States. All these groups advocate for compensatory action in the form of reparations, cash, money, payouts, land, tax exemption, etc., etc. We know the reparations platforms and reparations programs that have been divvied out to everybody else. We need that too. We want that check too. We want that land too. We want that tax exemption too. We want everything that come with that term, compensatory action in the form of reparations, including cash. Let's move on. Now, I'm not going to bog down and try to break down and make clear what I mean by foundational Black American, what I mean by American Descendants of Slaves, what I mean by Descendants of American Slaves. We're talking about United States citizens subject to Black classification that descend from victims of chattel slavery in these United States. That you can't get no more clearer than that. With the sources that I cited, go do some more research on that. I am trying to get to the most popular topic that's in current events today, Mrs. Senator, Madam Senator Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is not a foundational Black American. Kamala Harris is not a descendant of American slave. Kamala Harris is not an American descendant of slaves. That's either true or it's not true. Here on People Activity Radio, JohnGHorse have concluded that that is true. She is not a foundational Black American. She is not an American descendant of slaves. She is not a descendant of American slaves, but she is classified as Black. That is extremely confusing. By design. Racial classification and the racial codes in the United States and across the globe are designed to be confusing, and only people who do the classifying are people who classify themselves as white and we suspect believe in racism and white supremacy. Those people we identify as the dominant society, people who run things and classify themselves as white. They do the classifying. So today they'll tell us Kamala Harris is Black, but tomorrow they'll tell us that she's Indian. A day after that, they'll tell us she's a white woman or a Polish woman. You don't have any power or influence to go against whatever the dominant society says. You are subject to their will. And they play these racial classification games to maintain, refine, and keep the wheel a-rolling. The wheel of white terror domination, racism, white supremacy, and or systematic anti-Blackness. That's either true or it's not true. Let's move on. Saying all this, a little tension is in my voice, and I promise myself I'm not going to go on a rant because this is not rant-worthy subject matter. I am expressing myself. I am doing this show to put a little bit of respect on a foundational Black American warrior's name by the name of Charlotta Bass. I'm going to say her name one more time. Carolina-born Charlotta Bass and California Black warrior extraordinaire, entrepreneur, freedom fighter. I mean, I can go on and on with the adjectives, but we gonna understand and we gonna put some respect on Charlotta Bass's name because she is foundational Black American and she did run for vice president. And the disgust and the insult that foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slaves, descendants of American slaves should feel here in the United States of America is for the mainstream media to promote Kamala Harris as the first African American woman to do such a thing as, or to have the title of vice president on a presidential campaign. It's not true. First of all, Kamala Harris is classified as Black, but she is not foundational Black American. Kamala Harris is classified as Black, but she is not American descendant of slave. Kamala Harris is classified as Black, but she is not a descendant of American slaves. That's either true or it's not true. Here on P.A.R, People Activity Radio, JohnGHorse says that that's true. Both can it be true at the same time. Only people that seems to be confused about this, I have concluded, are people who are subject to Black classification. And that would be my group, foundational Black Americans, American descendants of slaves, descendants of American slaves. However you want to play it, however you want to say it. Here on People Activity Radio, we attempt to remove confusion. And what we finna do is put a little bit of respect on a foundational Black American, American descendant of slave, descendant of American slave warrior. We're finna do a little bit of administrative duties of Black self-respect. In the spirit of Queen Mother, Frances Cress Welsing, we are going to read the bio of our ancestor, Charlotta Bass. One of the responsibilities of people who understand that they are an exclusive group, one of the responsibilities of each and every member of the group, and you can find this in everybody else's group. You ever mistakenly called a person that identifies as Puerto Rican or Cuban, or vice versa? You ever called a Dominican person that comes from the Dominican Republic a Colombian? The first thing they do is check you on spot, and they let you know who they are and where they come from. It's gonna be some understanding, almost furniture moving, to get that particular thing straight. That's a codification. That's a mentality. And we recognize that identifying as American descendants of slaves, identifying as United States descendants of slavery, identifying as foundational Black Americans, identifying as descendants of American slaves is something extremely recent. And we kind of like rookies when it comes to our lineage. Look at me as a position coach. Look at JohnGHorse. Look at P.A.R. Look at Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. Look at Tariq Nasheed. Look at Norris Shelton as a position coach. breaking down the fundamentals of the position that you are playing, of the team that you are on, why it is important. Let me lower my tone. I always tell myself I'm not going to get to this level, but I do. I apologize in advance, family. But this stuff touched me. It touched me real deep because I want to convey how we are supposed to feel about ourselves. Our people have came through some smut in these United States of America, and we have paid the bill. We have paid the price. Everybody else eat the meal, though, coming from somewhere else, including immigrants that are classified as black. Am I saying that we need to mistreat and name call people who do not come from our heritage? No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, like every other group does habitually, we must develop a protective mentality when it comes to people being thrown into our group without any form of scrutiny and resistance. And I'm here to say, even though Kamala Harris is indeed an accomplished, talented, articulate, beautiful woman that has some black ancestry, or as mainstream media would call her, a woman of color, even though she has all that going on for her, I really don't want her thrown into foundational black American descendant of slave, descendants of American slave. I don't want her thrown into my group because she's not. She's never claimed it, as you heard in the clips that I played earlier. And for political capital, the consummate politician that she is, she uses it at her convenience whenever she needs it, and then she will take it away at her convenience when it is not beneficial to her goals or her interests. What I'm saying is people who are classified as black and subject to black classification historically have not had that luxury. When you get that black classification, ain't no shaking it. And as one of my contemporaries told me, and I'm gonna call him Detroit Red Baron, under the system of racism and white supremacy, it is extremely non-beneficial to be classified in black in all areas of people activity, not only worldwide, in these United States of America. But we still here. We still surviving. We still shaking and moving. And that in itself, you understand what I am saying, is an accomplishment alone that no one else can claim. So like I said, I am going to put a little bit of respect and do a little bit of administrative duties by honoring a warrior, a freedom fighter by the name of Charlotta Bass, United States descendant of slave, Charlotta Bass. I'm going to bring her in right too. Got to put a little respect on her name. We're going to bring her in with the Hamilton's depiction of put respect on it. You know how we do it here on People Activity Radio. Cue the Claire.
Whoa, I want you to put it out. Put some respect on it. Listen, when you say my name, put some respect on it. I ain't playing with y'all. Put some respect on it. And I ain't gonna say it. And I ain't gonna say it no more. Listen, now I could have pulled up. Put some respect on it. But that ain't gay. Put some respect on it.
Charlotta Amanda Spears Bass was an American educator, newspaper publisher, editor, and civil rights activist. She also focused on various other issues such as housing rights, voting rights, and labor rights, as well as police brutality and harassment. Bass is believed to be the first foundational Black American woman to own and operate a newspaper in the United States. She published the California Eagle from 1912 until 1951. In 1952, Bass became the first foundational Black American woman nominated for vice president as a candidate of the Progressive Party. Due to her activities, Bass was repeatedly accused of being part of the Communist Party, for which there was no evidence and which Bass herself repeatedly denied. She was monitored by the FBI, who continued to view her as a potential security threat up until she was in her 90s.
And I ain't gonna say it.
Charlotta Amanda Spears was born in Sumter, South Carolina on February 14, 1874 to Hiram and Kate Spears. She was the sixth child of 11. She received an education from public schools and one semester at Pembroke State College. When she was 20 years old, she moved to live with her brother in Providence, Rhode Island, where she worked for the Providence Watchman. Spears worked for the Providence Watchman for about 10 years. She moved to California for her health and ended up working at the California Eagle. Her first job at the California Eagle consisted of selling subscriptions. When its founder, John Nemore, died, she assumed the role of editor for the paper. She later became the owner of the California Eagle after purchasing it in auction for $50. At the time, she took courses at Columbia University and the University of California. In 1912, a new editor, Joseph Bass, joined the Eagle. Bass had been one of the founders of the Topeka Plain Dealer. He shared his concern with Spears about the injustice and racial discrimination in society. The Eagle developed a large Black readership. By 1925, the Eagle employed a staff of 12 and published 20 pages a week. The Eagle's circulation of 60,000 made it the largest African-American newspaper on the West Coast. It is credited as pioneering multi-ethnic politics, advocating Asian American and Mexican American civil rights in the 1940s, during which time the California Eagle, along with African American presses, were under investigation by the Office of the Secretary of War, who viewed it as a threat to national security. The Department of Justice interrogated Bass in 1942 over claims that the paper was funded by Japan and Germany. When the editor, John J. Nemore, became ill, he turned the operations of the Eagle over to Spears. After Nemore's death, the paper's new owner put Spears in charge. She renamed the newspaper company to the California Eagle due to the increasing social and political issues. Her purpose for the California Eagle was to write about the wrongs of society. The newspaper served as a source of both information and inspiration for the Black community, which was often ignored or negatively portrayed by the predominant white press. As publisher, Bass was committed to producing a quality periodical. In her weekly column, On the Sidewalk, begun in 1927, she drew attention to the unjust social and political conditions for all Los Angeles minority communities and campaigned vigorously for reform. Bass published the California Eagle from 1912 to 1951. Bass and her husband combated such issues as the derogatory images in D.W. Griffith's film, The Birth of a Nation, Los Angeles discriminatory hiring practices, the revival of the Ku Klux Klan, police brutality, and restricting housing covenants. In her pursuit against the Ku Klux Klan, Bass received threatening phone calls and at one point was confronted by 8 men robed in white, who she scared off after displaying a firearm. She was also unsuccessfully sued for libel by Klan leader G.W. Price after Bass published a letter from the Klan which detailed plans to exterminate black leaders. The Basses championed the black soldiers of the 24th Infantry who were unjustly sentenced in 1917 Houston race riot. They also covered the case and supported the Scottsboro brothers, 9 young men who were framed and convicted of rape in Scottsboro, Alabama in 1931. In 1934, Joseph Bass died and Charlotta Bass assumed control of the paper. The paper's coverage and focus during the 1940s was caused to be credited as pioneering multi-ethnic politics, advocating Asian American and Mexican American civil rights. During this time period, the California Eagle, also with other African American presses, were under investigation by the Office of the Secretary of War, who viewed it as a threat to national security. The Department of Justice interrogated Bass in 1942 over claims that the paper was funded by Japan and Germany. The FBI continued to monitor Bass as they deemed her actions as advocating the Communist Party despite a lack of evidence, and Bass herself denying any assertions of the kind. In 1943, the Department of Justice was asked by the Post Office Department to revoke her mailing permit. The Post Office Department argued that the newspaper could not be mailed due to sensitive and illegal material within the paper. Bass again won the case, and the Department of Justice said her mailing permit would not be revoked.
And I ain't gonna say it no more.
Bass continued to use the newspaper as a way of raising awareness of various issues facing African Americans, foundational Black Americans, and other minorities, such as restrictive covenants in housing, which the United States Supreme Court found to be unconstitutional in 1948. Bass continued to run the California Eagle on her own until selling it in 1951 and moving to New York City, where she focused on politics. Her activism and political activities would result in continued belief that she was a communist, which she continued to deny. During the 1920s, Bass became co-president of the Los Angeles chapter of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, founded by Marcus Garvey. Bass formed the Home Protective Association to defeat housing covenants in all white neighborhoods. She helped found the Industrial Business Council, which fought discrimination in employment practices and encouraged Black people to go into business. As editor and publisher of the California Eagle, the oldest Black newspaper on the West Coast, Charlotta Bass fought against restrictive covenants in housing and segregated schools in Los Angeles. She campaigned to end job discrimination at Los Angeles General Hospital, the Los Angeles Rapid Transit Company, the Southern Telephone Company, and the Boulder Canyon Project. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, she continued to encourage Black businesses with the campaign known as Don't Buy Where You Can't Work. As a leader of both the NAACP and the UNIA, Bass spanned the divide between integrationist and separatist Black politics. She was the director of the youth movement of the NAACP. It had 200 members, including some actors and actresses such as Lena Horne, Hattie McDaniel, and Louis Beavers. In 1940, the Republican Party chose Bass, Western Regional Director, for Wendell Wilkes' presidential campaign. 3 years later, she became the first African-American grand jury member for the Los Angeles County Court. Also in 1943, Bass led a group of Black leaders to the office of the mayor of Los Angeles, Fletcher Barron's office. They demanded an expansion of the Mayor's Committee on American Unity, more public mass meetings to promote interracial unity, and an end to the discriminatory hiring practices of the privately owned Los Angeles Railway Company. The mayor listened, but agreed to do no more than to expand his committee. Then later in the 1940s, Bass left the Republican Party and joined the Progressive Party because she believed neither of the major parties was committed to civil rights. Bass served in 1952 as the national chairman of the Sojourners for Truth and Justice, an organization of black women set up to protest racial violence in the South. That year, she was nominated for Vice President of the United States by the Progressive Party. She was the running mate of lawyer Vincent Hallinan. Bass became the first African-American woman to run for Vice President of the United States. Her platform called for civil rights, women's rights, and the end of the Korean War and peace with the Soviet Union. Bass's slogan during the vice presidential campaign was "Win or lose, we win by raising the issues." I'm going to say that once again. Bass became the first foundational black American woman to run for vice president of the United States. Her platform called for civil rights, women's rights, and the end of the Korean War and peace with the Soviet Union. Bass's slogan during the vice presidential campaign was "Win or lose, we win by raising the issues." Let's move on. Bass worked on issues that also attracted Luso Marino, who was active in Afro-Chicano politics in Los Angeles during the 1930s through 1950s. No record shows that the two women ever met, but in 1943 both served on the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee, a multiracial group that fought for the release of several Chicanos convicted of murder by an all-white jury, making Bass and Marino part of the same constellation of struggle. Bass wrote her last column for the California Eagle on April 26, 1951, and sold the paper soon after. Considering the sum of her career as she was completing her autobiography, 40 Years, in 1960, Bass wrote, "It has been a good life that I have had, though a very hard one, but I know the future will be even better. And as I think back, I know that is the only kind of life. In serving one's fellow man, one serves himself best." In 1966, Bass had a stroke and afterwards retired to a Los Angeles nursing home. In 1967, at the age of 91, the FBI still classified Charlotta Bass as a potential security threat. During her years of retirement, she maintained a library in her garage for the young people in her neighborhood. It was a continuation of her long fight to give all people opportunities and education. She died in Los Angeles on April 12, 1969, from a cerebral hemorrhage. She is buried alongside her husband in Evergreen Cemetery, East Los Angeles, California. Put some respect on Charlotta Bass's name. She, this Queen Mother Warrior, is the first foundational black American woman to be vice president on a presidential campaign. And I'm not placing any dispersions on Senator Kamala Harris, but she couldn't tie the shoestrings of Charlotta Bass. How are we going to accept the misrepresentation of our group? And how are we going to let this disrespect sit? Like I said before, I went through my diatribe. If you make a mistake and call a Puerto Rican, a Cuban, it's going to be some furniture moving. Not only that, who are foundational black Americans? What have we endured? Where is the movie of Charlotta Bass? Since we talking about all this woman's right and woman's liberation and all this, at one point was Charlotta Bass prevented from maximizing her talents and her warrior mentality within the black American community? What black man stopped her? At every point that she went, the global system of racism and white supremacy, the dominant society, was attempting to prevent her justice track. Here on People Activity Radio, we're going to put some respect on our name. Is we finished or is we done?
I want to look in your face, put some respect on it. I ain't gonna say, and I ain't gonna say it no more. Oh, are we finished? Put some respect on it. Or is we done? Oh, put some respect on it. Ah! Oh, three of y'all, put some respect on it. And I ain't gonna say it, and I ain't gonna say it no more.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. If you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. Confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. If you do not understand, confuse you. Confuse you.
My definition of white supremacy and racism, I use those two terms as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.